Andrew Yang won the 2020 Democratic primary. I see those weird looks you're giving me right now. Andrew Yang just dropped out, you say. Andrew Yang didn't win a single delegate in Iowa or New Hampshire. Well, hold on a second, because Andrew Yang got more support, raised more money, and was in more debates than many of the senators and governors who dropped out before him. Andrew Yang won a debate despite getting less than 3 minutes of speaking time. Andrew Yang got more negative publicity for not wearing a necktie than for anything else he did on the campaign trail. The fact is, Andrew Yang had a profound impact on the 2020 election that I would argue is more than any other candidate. In fact, I would argue that he and Bernie were the only ones pushing for a truly new Democratic Party, although to be fair, Bernie was pushing for the exact same message back in 2016, so maybe Andrew Yang was the only one with a novel message this time round. I don't know if any of you went to Andrew Yang's website, but this dude was talking about literally everything. He wanted to implement ranked choice voting, which if you've watched CGP Grey, you'll know it's a really good idea. He wanted to talk about pennies and whether they should even still be around in 2020. He wanted to create a robocalling text line. He wanted to find new purposes for old malls that are no longer being used. Mainstream media outlets said that Elizabeth Warren was the candidate with the plan for everything. I disagree, that candidate was Andrew Yang. And that doesn't even get into Andrew Yang's main focus, the problems of automation and the benefits of something like UBI. While Donald Trump was tweeting about Sleepy Joe and Elizabeth Warren was calling herself an Indian, Andrew Yang was sharing a message that no other candidate was talking about. The idea that the American economy is changing rapidly, that millions of people are at risk of losing their jobs to automation, that parents who stay at home with young children are doing valuable work even if it's not financially worth anything, and that everyone is intrinsic value irrespective of their age, gender, or ethnicity. You want proof that Andrew Yang's message caught on? Other candidates started addressing what Andrew Yang was saying in debates and interviews. Elizabeth Warren had to defend her stance on automation at the October Democratic debate. Joe Biden talked all about the fourth industrial revolution in an interview with Stephen Colbert. Bernie Sanders started talking about preventing robotics and automation from displacing American workers. Why were all these candidates having to talk about automation and UBI? Because Andrew Yang's message was gaining traction. Take a look at the polls. In Iowa, only 17% of expected caucus goers supported a universal basic income back in September, but just 4 months later, 60% of them were on board. Let me just re-emphasize, this all happened without Andrew Yang winning a single delegate. Policy aside, Andrew Yang was just the most fun candidate running for the Democratic Party nomination. He crowd-surfed at a rally. He skateboarded in an assembly hall. He gave out $1,000 to random supporters. He sprayed whipped cream into people's mouths. This is opposed to Joe Biden, who just put his foot into his own mouth. Honestly, Andrew Yang was the only candidate who really looks like he was having fun on the campaign trail, and as silly as it sounds, that does actually matter. If a candidate is having fun, their supporters are going to have a lot of fun too. And honestly, you'd be hard-pressed to find as passionate a group of supporters as the Yang Gang. I mean, these people were staying until midnight or well after midnight just to get something autographed by Yang. Andrew Yang's career in American politics isn't over. Andrew Yang has already talked about the idea of running for president again, or running to be the mayor of a really big city like New York, and honestly, to Andrew Yang, I really only have one thing to say. Go for it. Just because you couldn't win a majority of the 5% of Iowans or the 20% of New Hampshire residents who participated in this year's Democratic Party elections doesn't mean anything. As 538 points out of the 4 black candidates, 2 Asian Americans, and 1 Latino who ran for president this year on the Democratic Party side, Andrew Yang was the only one to have qualified for the last presidential debate. People wanted to hear from Andrew Yang this election season, and they loved the fact that he was willing to talk to just about anyone about just about anything. So let me just say again, I don't care who the ultimate Democratic Party nominee is. It could be Bernie Sanders, Pete Buttigieg, or the eagle who attacked Donald Trump last year. Andrew Yang is the true winner of the 2020 Democratic Party primaries.
What is this?
That's an espresso bean with dark chocolate.
It was in that moment the Yang Gang realized their biggest mistake.